You're listening to 90 Day Soulmate with the Relationship Engineers, Jim Gulnick and Lisett Guevara, only on LA Talk Radio.
Welcome to 90 Day Soulmate with Lisett
and Jim.
Today, we're talking about how to get EQ. What's EQ, Lisett?
Something cute.
It's very cute. It's very cute. No, it's emotional intelligence. Some people use EI. Some people use EQ. We're going to stick with EQ so we kind of can flip back and forth from people thinking IQ, which is intelligence quotient.
Okay.
Or intelligence, general intelligence, and this being EQ, or sometimes known as EI, which is trait emotional intelligence. And we're going to talk about how to get it, what it is.
How I can improve my emotional intelligence.
I don't know if you can improve. Your emotional intelligence is so good.
I am set already.
It's perfect. So emotional intelligence is recognition. First, you have to recognize something. It's the saliency. Saliency just means like the saltiness of the situation. It means how rich an emotion it is, how rich the stimulus is that's causing something. The context, what is doing this emotional charging of the situation? You know, what is the situation? What's going on? So in that recognition is recognizing the emotional state of others, also recognizing your own emotional state, so you can then manage your emotions, the situation, and the context, meaning change what's going on and not just how you feel about it, but actually change the context and the environment, right?
The people around, yes. It's the capacity for recognize first your emotion, and also, like you say, the context and people around.
If you remember a couple of shows ago, we've probably talked about this 100 times, is that your own emotions impact how you think other people feel. So in order for you to understand how someone else feels, you do have to recognize how you feel, the emotional content of yourself. Monitor that so you may better understand how others feel. And emotional intelligence is the extent of which you can put your own emotions to the side and really recognize what's going on with other people in order to have a good outcome. We talk about that in work. It's like some customer calls up and they're all upset, and you can get very defensive. Now your emotions are going against their emotions. Or something that years ago I used to do, a customer service training, we used to talk about getting on the side of your customer, understanding why they're feeling upset. Hey, tell me about the situation. Why are you upset? Oh, wow, that would make me upset as well. I'm really sorry for that to have happened. I can help you. It was trying to take them from that emotional state of being by themselves, thinking they're going to fight with you, to saying, hey, let's work on this together and let's solve it. You had to separate yourself from the situation to understand their point of view.
This is the difficult part.
It is. So what's the benefits of having high emotional intelligence?
Tell me.
Tell you. Well, here's a little bullet point thing we have here. The capacity for learning and problem solving. So here's some things that are from another research study, is that with higher emotional intelligence, your capacity for actually learning and problem solving goes up because the emotions aren't stopping you from thinking clearly. We're actually going to talk about that, the biological reasons that emotions get in the way of logically thinking. And therefore, if you're able to control them and manage them, you can actually have a higher capacity for solving problems. Going on with those bullet points helps the performance on difficult mental challenges. So research studies have shown that those who have better grasp on emotions in an emotionally charged situation have higher performance. It also shows that It enables, oh, this was a nice one, enables completion of complex problems in the face of high emotions, especially when they're highly cognitive tasks where you have to think.
Yeah.
Have to think a lot. And then finally, emotional intelligence was actually pretty highly correlated, well, somewhat correlated to verbal intelligence and nonverbal intelligence. If you've ever heard these people, they'll post up on Facebook that the more curse words you know, the smarter you are.
I don't see that.
But a lot of people say, oh, the more curse words you know, the smarter you are. It actually is the more vocabulary you know, the smarter you are. And people who tend to know more vocabulary tend to know more curse words, tend to.
It is smart in the emotional or in the knowledge?
Well, in this case, the study shows that there is a somewhat correlation between verbal intelligence, the ability to know a lot of words, what they mean, because this way you can speak with somebody and you can ask them questions about how they're feeling and their situation, and the more words you know, the better you're able to communicate.
Okay.
So that would be one. And then the second part of that is nonverbal intelligence is also somewhat correlated to emotional intelligence. It's just that general intelligence, general emotional intelligence, there is some similarity, but there is a divergence as well. There are some people who are highly emotionally intelligent, not as intellectual. What is it called? Yeah, not as highly skilled in maybe math and English, but they're far superior in dealing with people, getting problems solved.
And also backward, you can find that people have IQ high and emotional is in the bottom.
And I told you when I was in engineering school, there was one kid in my class who was like the top student, 4.0 on everything, but he would rock at his seat. He was a nice guy, but he had a hard time talking with people.
Yeah.
And communicating. And I had an easier time talking.
Yes.
not doing as much work,
okay.
But easier time talking.
Yes.
Can you believe it?
Yes.
Thanks, baby.
You're welcome.
So basically, those were the general benefits of emotional intelligence. What would be job-related benefits of emotional intelligence? Here are a few. Increased job performance. That people who are highly emotionally intelligent or have higher emotional intelligence do better on the job. That job performance was about a 0.5 correlation to emotional intelligence, meaning emotional intelligence explained about 52% of job performance. Self-awareness, self-management, self-motivation, social awareness were other aspects that they looked at in this research study. And those were all highly related as well, but emotional intelligence was one of the higher. Better relationships at work when you're more emotionally intelligent. Seniority and tenure. Those with better emotional intelligence tend to have more tenure, meaning they're longer on the job, and they are raised to higher levels in the organization because of their ability to help others in their situations, take care of problems.
Yeah. So I always say that sometimes the good manager maybe not know a lot about the business company, but know about handle people, And this is unique because you feel you have a team that people promote. So,
and we had a little teaser there. The last bullet point was those people who are more highly emotionally intelligent can handle situations in a more logical state of controlling their emotions and helping others get through problems, tend to make $29,000 a year more on average than those in similar positions with lower emotional intelligence. Those who maybe clam up when they get angry, or they can't solve the problem, or walk away, or want to fight.
No working team.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm going to meet you across the street and we're going to have it out.
Okay.
At
what time?
I had one employee do that once.
Yeah.
They would get upset at somebody and they would challenge them to fight across the street. And they thought that was a good thing. At least I'm not fighting on company property.
Yeah.
So they thought it was an intelligent thing to do.
You just start to sell tickets for them. Okay, who
Make a lot of money that
Yeah.
way. That
And
is
this
true.
is the 29,000 per year.
Yeah, that's how you make the extra money.
Oh, I got it.
Let's go to the next thing here. This was something that I thought would be helpful to us all. This was looking at personality. And is there a correlation between personality and emotional intelligence? So there's the big 5 in personality traits, which are openness to new experience, conscientiousness, what is that called again? Neuroticism. Did we already say extroversion? I'll just read it off here, which is much easier. Extroversion, agreeableness to new experiences, conscientiousness,
Cheers to
right?
everybody with you.
Neuroticism, which is how you react really too emotionally to things, and openness to new experience. So the relationship between the big 5 personality traits and general emotional intelligence was that the highest correlation was neuroticism. But it was a negative, the highest correlation, but it was a negative. So it was almost a negative 45% correlation, meaning that as you became more neurotic, your emotional intelligence dropped much more rapidly. Or if you had low neurotic behavior, you had the highest corresponding emotional intelligence increase. The other things that were, the other ones were, and I'll put that back on screen here,
Please.
which is extroversion was, and we had this discussion before the show, that extroversion I thought would be a relatively high correlation, but it may turn out that extroversion, which is that ability to want to go out and talk with people and meet and greet and be social, that has maybe a certain correlation to it. But if you're too much that way, maybe you're not listening as much and being quiet and feeling that it may be a little bit too outward. Agreeableness, you have to be sort of agreeable. Conscientiousness was high, a 0.43 or 41% explanation, and openness to new experience, 0.37.
So if we see the emotionally higher is the people, the second one, agreeable?
Agreeableness, or are you talking
Yeah.
about conscientiousness?
No, emotional and agreeable is 0.3.
0.336.
So what does it mean that?
So what it means is that and basically you're creating a line between 0, let's just say someone's rated 0 on agreeableness, like they don't agree with anything, or 100% they agree with everything. Their agreeableness, when you then correlate people on that scale of 0 to 100 to people on a scale of 0 to 100 on emotionally intelligent, there's about a 30% explanation as you go higher on this, you tend to go higher on the other. That each explains the other by about 30%. So the one that was the negative 45%, or if you flip it over as a scale of 100 on neuroticism, and 0 is that as you got further and further away from being neurotic, you got higher and higher on the scale of emotional intelligence.
Okay.
But at a 45% explanation rather than a 30-some% explanation. So all these have some explanation of emotional intelligence, but emotional intelligence is used as a separate factor or separate trait. They now call it TEI, which is trait emotional intelligence, because it's such a separate trait than these other 5. Even though there's some explanation of it based upon these other 5, those 5 cannot isolate emotional intelligence on their own and therefore make emotional intelligence a non-needed variable. So emotional intelligence, when added to these things, can help be a predictor of success on a job, how well you manage others, and what is the other thing we wanted to talk about? How about the benefits in relationships? We all talk about relationships, whether that's on the job or with our partner. So how does emotional intelligence work with that?
Okay.
So the quality of romantic relationships was increased with emotional intelligence. The relationship satisfaction was higher. That there was positive and common coping mechanisms for couples who had matching emotional intelligence levels. The higher together they were in emotional intelligence, the more positive and common coping mechanisms, meaning if they had a problem, how they would deal with it. Couples with matching levels of emotional intelligence tend to be happier and stay together longer. And this was an interesting one, that you could have high emotional intelligence at work, but it didn't mean you had the same the high emotional intelligence that you needed for work wasn't necessarily the same pieces that you needed for a relationship.
Yeah, and I see that in many people that is pretty good, maybe in the office, in the home is terrible, or backwards. Some people is terrible in the job, and you see in the home, and it's amazing.
So when we come back, we're going to talk about what is the mechanism that primes us for, are we going to be emotionally intelligent in this situation or not? We're going to look at that when we come back on 90 Day Soulmate with Lisett
And Jim.
We're here at Gulnick at Francis Ford Coppola's new winery. Well, they've had it for a few years, but this is his library. Let's take a look at one of the books in his library. Here we have 90 Day Soulmate, How to Find Your Perfect Match in 90 Days by Lisett Guevara and Jim Gulnick.
Welcome back to 90 Day Soulmate with Lisett
And Jim.
Today we're talking how to get EQ, how to get emotional intelligence. We talked a little bit about what it was, how it related to the 5 factors of personality, and the benefits of it generally at work and in relationships.
Any kind of relationship.
Any kind of relationship. So recognizing the emotional state of others. We talked about Dr. Paul Ekman and his evolutionary psychology and study of facial expressions around the world, and how there are these 7 universal facial expressions for happy, sad, surprise, angry, disgust, contempt, and fear. These expressions that you view on the face of other people, or at least you think you view on the face of other people, are somewhat influenced by your own feelings and emotions and what you may think that the other person's feeling. But these are signs of how you read the emotions in situations. But it's not just the facial expression, right? It's the tone of voice people are using.
Yeah.
Body language. You come out of your office, or you're on the shop floor with somebody and they're talking to someone like this, and they've got their chest up in the air, and the other guy's kind of like turned like this and his head's down, and you start reading the situation. You go, okay, this person's looks like they're being a little aggressive and angry, and this person's a little bit intimidated. And you start reading that situation, and you're like, well, I can go out there and attack the guy who's trying to attack this other, intimidating. I'm like, you can't do that to this person now. Or you could say, hey, what's up? What's going on? Tell me what's going on. So it's reading those kinds of situations. As part of it is the body language, part of it's the facial expression, part of it's the tone of voice.
How your face, your eyes, your mouth. Yeah.
And then the other part could be is, what is the actual situation? Is there a pile of stuff on the floor that shouldn't be there? Is it this guy's stuff, but this guy had the forklift? I mean, it's the whole context of the situation. It's the saliency. How bad is the situation that caused it? And we talked about saliency, and I like saying it this way: what is that called? Saline solution. So saliency to me is the saltiness of the situation. How much spice has been thrown into this situation that you have to deal with? It's not just the emotion, but it's the stuff that's causing the emotion.
Yeah.
Right. The context. So being able to see and recognize that. Why we say our own emotions impact that is, we've talked about this before too. All humans may exhibit similar facial expressions for basic emotions, but they have difficult difficulty. They have difficulty in recognizing the other person's face, right? So it's tough.
Yeah. And you need to know the person too, because
Do they always have an angry face?
Yeah, because I have some customer, for example, I remember one that she's difficult to see the eyes of the people. So every time that she talk this is, and I believe it's for me, but when I see that she talk with everybody in the room, it's she is like that.
And then you're like, oh, I'm glad that's not just me.
Yeah. So that is something that you need to wait to know a little more the people before you read the people.
It's called getting the baseline, right?
Yeah, the baseline.
So if you're doing an analysis of somebody and are they answering questions truthfully or lying or just having a conversation with a loved one, you need to know their baseline.
Yeah.
If they act a certain way on typical day and they use certain words and expressions and their hands move like this when they're talking, suddenly they're answering questions like this and they're not moving their mouth, and okay, there's something going on there. They're nervous about something.
Yeah.
So it's knowing how they normally are. If they never really look you in the eye and now they're looking you in the eye and saying, I didn't do it.
Yeah, so much that by no blinking.
I didn't do it. No blinking.
Yeah, no blinking.
Their shoulders doing this. I didn't do it. They've got gunpowder on their finger. I didn't do it. They've got splatter on their shirt. Oh, never mind. Different show.
Yeah, that's another show. Go to the topic.
The topic.
Yeah.
So, the reason we said that our own emotional content is important is that, again, relaying another study where people were put into a certain emotional mood and they were shown then a emotionless scene, they read their own emotion that was on their face onto the scene they were viewing. So people will read into a situation how they're feeling about the situation rather than others. So that is something about emotional intelligence, is understanding your own feelings will influence how you think others are feeling.
Yeah.
When context is not taken into consideration, or the wrong context is primed. Okay, you were just having an argument with your boss in an office, and now you come out to the floor and your emotional state has been primed, and now you're going to react to something else that's going out there based upon your emotional state rather than the emotional state of this new situation, that people will react wrong in that situation. And their attribution to what they're seeing or their judgment that they're making is going to be potentially an error. So,
Okay. Yeah.
So what is that you said? The first thing you have to do is understand your own emotion?
Yeah, you have to self-observation first to figure out how you feel before you start to assume some situation.
Because our own feelings impact our judgment and actions.
So watch your face first before you try to describe some situation.
See how you feel before you assess the feeling of the situation. Now let's start talking about the biological processes, the brain processes, the chemistry processes, the what is it called, evolutionary psychology behind emotional intelligence. Simply, emotional intelligence, let's look how it acts in our brains. We recognize some emotion, at least we think we do. We have a feeling of something that's happening in a situation. The amygdala, which reacts sometimes based upon fears and what scares us in the past and things that have been programmed into the hollows of our brain, deep in our brain from evolution, will pop out based upon what we're seeing. And the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex work in combination into a response that becomes this, what we call the emotional intelligence response. So again, generally speaking, and I don't think you feel this happening in your brain, but the amygdala, which is deep in your brain, is taking the emotional piece, especially the fear and the scare and the fright and the anger, and that's where that is basically what do they call it? The ugly head of that emotion is popping up in the amygdala. And the prefrontal cortex has to look at that situation, and the two of them have to work together. One looking on emotion and one looking on logic, right? The prefrontal cortex being that logical piece. What we talked about again just before the show was how the first stage of a relationship, that lust stage, where our prefrontal cortex is shut down because we're in love, the emotion of love is just overwhelming, and we have these chemicals being thrown into our brain that shut off our prefrontal cortex. Well, guess what?
You're not thinking.
You're not thinking during that. Well, this is the same thing that happens when your amygdala shuts down your prefrontal cortex when you're in a situation where you're like scared or fear or frightened, or it's anger and you're this is stuff that's been programmed deep into you. And when you feel that emotion building up, it's that the amygdala can be chopping off the function of the prefrontal cortex. So the amygdala detects the stress, the prefrontal cortex justifies, moderates the reaction to that stress, because you have to think about what your action's going to be. And the relationship between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala has a stress response, an emotional regulation, and memory formation. Is that based upon how those two things are interacting, you can start forming memories, from when you're a tiny little child until now, and then it sort of like programs how you're going to react and continues to react. But this is where we say the emotional intelligence is the strength of that interaction between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, and how the two work together. When they work together really well, one is the amygdala telling you how you feel, because now it's throwing chemicals in your body, but the prefrontal cortex being able to say, hey, wait a minute, how am I feeling? And going, okay, thank you for letting me know how I feel, Mr. Amygdala or Mrs. Amygdala. And now, based upon that, this is how I need to act. I know it can't be always that logical, but that is what the emotional intelligence is understanding the feeling that you're getting in order to now assess other things that are in your environment.
I remember one speaker talking about the same topic and say that he got it because when he was a child and the doctor removed the amygdala here.
Here?
Yes, they call the same. And this is he become angry so easy.
Oh, now I'm angry. Oh my God.
Different
that's a tonsil.
amygdala.
It's tonsils.
It's different amygdala. It's in the brain.
So where is the amygdala? Well, here it is. We just showed it before. It's that little blue thing there. And that's kind of like in the deep part of our brain. It responds to the emotions and shuts down. It doesn't have to. It can shut down the prefrontal cortex if there's enough strong response. And this is where people will fly off the handle. They'll yell at each other. They'll get into a fight. They'll stop thinking clearly. They see red, where they just lose control, is when the prefrontal cortex is shut off completely. The amygdala sends a signal down to the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland, well, actually, I'll just go to the next slide because it's right on here. Here we go. The amygdala, this is something that you'll hear about, the amygdala hijack. The amygdala hijacks the functioning of the brain. It senses the stress, it releases this waterfall of neurotransmitters and hormones. It signals the adrenal gland, which lets out the adrenaline and noradrenaline, or norepinephrine. I love this. So it allows these chemicals to go out into our body. The amygdala also releases cortisol, and it triggers our fight, our flight, or our freeze functioning. So now if the amygdala is overwhelming, we've got fight, flight, freeze, and if our prefrontal cortex doesn't jump in and say, whoa, wait a minute, how do I react?
And maybe that is a one mechanism, defense mechanism, because
It is.
Yeah, you freeze, try to prevent and not do crazy stuff.
But we never, like, growing up in the jungle, 100,000 years ago or 10,000 years ago, or, having to survive and fight, living only till you're 25 and having to fight off other attackers all the time. This stuff was really important for survival, that the amygdala being able to quickly get you into a state of fight, flight, or freeze, that to quickly get into that state would be almost life-preserving in a way.
Yeah.
For many things, being chased by a bear, or being having to go after a rabbit because you needed to eat it. Chase a tomato. Wait a minute, those aren't plants.
Rescue your child in the car.
Rescue.
I fly.
So what is the release of these chemicals? What does it do to our body? Our heart beats faster, pumping more blood, raising our blood pressure. Our lungs are breathing more efficiently. We're getting more oxygen because we need more oxygen. We're breathing deeper. Our heart's pumping faster. The blood is now putting more oxygen to our brain and the muscles of our body. It makes you more alert. Raises blood sugar levels, giving you energy, meaning it's also putting sugar into your, the blood sugar to give you energy. So your body is primed for action. In fact, super strength. You've heard about people like lifting cars, and it's like, and they go, oh, you can't lift a car, and they can't. But with all that adrenaline, they were able to do something like that. You remember when you chased down the car, and your son was, your baby was driving the car.
Yes. The adrenaline make a, like that you run with high heels.
And time freezes, right? Time just kind of like stops. You're like, yeah. And what else it does is, so part of that, even going more into it, is your eyes, your pupils dilate, and that's, I'm going to take it off this thing, but your pupils dilate, opening up, allowing more light into them so you can see things and see movement more precisely. This would be something that would help you save your life, is now I can see more things happening because I have more light going into my eyes. The skin becomes white because the blood is taken from the skin, put into your lungs, put into your heart, put into your muscles, put it into your brain in order to react and move to survive. For running. There's another thing, is like under the fear thing, it moves some of the blood away from your extremities. Because that, and I read this somewhere, is that way if a tiger bit you, there'd be less blood there and you wouldn't bleed out as much. That if you were really relaxed when the tiger bit you, you'd bleed out faster. So by tensing up, it helps pull blood away from your extremities, puts them around your organs, gets the blood flow to your muscles so you can run and be stronger. If we are emotionally non-regulated, and we have anxiety and we have stress,
so your chemical is out of balance.
Your chemicals are out of balance.
And then you start to be sick.
Some of this chronic stress and anxiety can lead to high blood pressure, formation of artery clogging deposits, brain changes that may contribute to anxiety, depression, and addiction. It can cause people to eat more because you're stressed. People eat when they're under stress, ice cream, chocolate. And sometimes they do it because it just tastes good.
Looking for some stress. What is the stress? I don't have it. I want a chocolate.
Stressless. I'm stressed because I don't have any stress.
And then you eat chocolate.
Oh, no, you eat chocolate. Now I have stress. Okay, good.
How to Find Your Perfect Match in 90 Days by Lisett Guevara and James Gulnick. Actually, Jim Gulnick. Well, if it's good enough for Francis Ford Coppola, it's good enough for you.
How we react and how we interact with each person is going to be different. And that's why we have to understand how they normally are and what might make this situation different.
And also how you are, because I say that people can feel contaminated with the situation, So maybe your regular behavior is in one way, and then when you are with somebody, your reaction is different. Because you be influenced with the energy of the other person. So, and then people talking about the toxic people, okay? Or maybe you are the toxic too. So it's when two people with different emotions together maybe create a third situation, the impact more.
That's interesting. So maybe it's if you see this person first and this person second, there's never a problem. But if you see this person first and this person second, for some reason you always have a problem after that because you're picking up the emotions of this person and then you're carrying those emotions over here because maybe you're not toxic, but maybe you're a carrier.
Yeah, you be impacted, you be contaminated.
So now we have people who are the people who are contaminated, the people who are toxic, the people who are
absorbing the emotion from others and carry on and become different.
So recognize, this is one of the first things, is recognize, are you the toxic person? Are you capable of being the toxic person or carrying the toxicity of some situation to another? Can you recognize, I see what's going on here, this is what I need to do to stop it.
Yeah.
To stop the reaction, I need to get some, what is that called? That stuff that you put in the pool? The baking soda?
Yeah.
I need the buffer. I need a buffer. I need to put a buffer in here to settle everything down. Distract, Do you distract in a situation? Everyone's still upset and you go, hey, the Goodyear blimp. Yeah. It's an old commercial. But how do you do you confront somebody who's...
How do you
buffer? The buffering is not you might not be able to, like if two people are arguing, you go in and you try to calm the situation, listen to both sides, hey, tell me what's going on, and you separate, these are the things that you learn how to do. You separate the people, you talk to each of them, you say, how do you feel, what's going on, what do you think they said, okay, I'm going to go talk to them, and then you become the liaison, the buffer, you're watering down. What did you say? Putting water on the fire.
Yeah, but if it's not one person, one of the two parties angry has to figure out which one. So that is also secret for relationship. You have your partner, your partner maybe is in one situation. You say, I cannot react right now. I have to wait. I have to be the buffer. And then when everything is calm, you drop in your statement or something that you want to say.
So don't bring gasoline to a fire.
Yeah.
Bring water unless it's an oil fire. Then you need some kind of powder stuff for it, right?
Yeah.
So you have to understand what you need to bring to the situation in order to bring the temperature down, the emotional control. So emotions, recognizing that we receive emotions, we communicate, and we interact with the emotions on our sleeve, that they can come and go quickly. But they will move us to action, and that's why we need the prefrontal cortex to kick in and say, whoa, hold on, before we take action, let's make sure it's appropriate for the situation. They are inextricably associated with facial expression, so that is one of the things we said you can use to understand the emotional context of a situation. But the other is tone of voice, it's body language, and the actual what is the environment. It's you have to be, what is that called? You have to be open and observant, and you have to be able to take in more information as quickly as possible to understand the whole situation. And then finally, we are chemically and physically changed by emotion. So are the people. So two people who may be the sweetest, most nice people, in a situation where it's really emotionally charged, might suddenly have a changed personality.
So, and also in this case, we can use our own technique when we start to dating. And I don't understand some kind of reaction that you have, some phrase, and I say, please say it again. And then you recognize what?
Oh, I must have said something wrong or mean. Now I have to rethink of what I said and restate. So part of this is, say it's a company that you work in and you are, one of the roles you have is managing people, is you have to not only work on yourself, but you may do a training, an emotional intelligence training for the people that talk about when you are upset, how to communicate, how to take a step back, how to take a breath, how to delay an action, how to do things appropriately. So there's a lot of training available for that. Maybe one day we'll go over some of that. But
okay, but in relationship, what is
in relationship, same thing. We talked about that if there was something that we misunderstood, or I said something that may have upset Lisett, instead of her being angry,
I say, I'm sorry, say it again. I don't understand what you say. So make a time that he's thinking and say,
oh, I'm sorry, love.
Okay.
You're right.
Now I understand what he say, and I keep going with the same statement.
Okay.
I was sorry. I don't speak English. No hablo inglés.
Yeah. So she's being nice when she says, she'll call me out on something that I say without saying, you said something wrong, just like, hey, I'm not understanding what you're saying, because I don't want to hurt Lisett. So if I say something that's hurtful, I rethink what I must have said, and I say, oh, okay, that's what I said, that what was wrong. Mm-hmm. This is how I restate it. So what I'm trying to communicate is there without the hurtful words or the way or the quick reaction.
Yeah, and also the quick reaction, the quick phrase. Also in my case, because I have to thinking, I have to maybe translate, and I say, you know what, maybe be quiet. What is it?
So let's talk about ways to get EQ, how to get emotional intelligence. Because our emotions are linked to how we see other people's emotions, our state, our physical state, our mental state, our well-being are very well tied to how we perceive other things. Therefore, what we're about to say, you'll understand, here are some tips on how to balance our lives to become more emotionally intelligent. 1, you can get a better emotional response to a situation by having a well-balanced diet. Can you believe we're talking about diet right now?
Yeah, that's amazing. So that means what you eat impact your emotion?
They do.
Mm-hmm.
There are people who don't eat well. Therefore, their body chemistry is thrown off. They don't feel well. And all that then impacts how they see a situation. Mm-hmm. So one of what we looked at is how to physically control, like the release of cortisol, the release of some of these chemicals in our brain have to do with our own chemistries and our diet. Not only our diet, but our sleep habits. So the first thing here is well-balanced diet, because you are what you eat. You are what you eat. Your emotions are what you eat. Right? Mm-hmm. So it was well-balanced diet, supplements as needed, talk to your doctor, make sure you're healthy. That's number 1. Number 2, take a deep breath. We talked about taking a second, a delay to respond, but also just throughout the day is taking time to have a deep breath. Maybe that is practicing yoga. Maybe that's part of your exercise routine. Maybe that's just every once in a while taking a deep breath, clearing your lungs. Research shows that it helps lower cortisol levels. It eases anxiety, depression, and improves your memory, which then will help your response to emotional situations. Reduce caffeine intake.
Oh, but if you don't have caffeine, also impact too. So balance the caffeine.
Balance your caffeine. Yeah. They brought up one which is called adrenal fatigue, which is if you're constantly reacting and you're producing the cortisol, and your adrenal glands is producing adrenaline, and you're constantly doing this, and you're just drinking coffee, is that you can get to a point where you're so fatigued that you need the coffee, and when you're done with the coffee, when your body washes out the coffee, you're tired again, and it may actually start raising the cortisol levels in your body, which is a bad thing, because then you're prone to react and snap instead of being able to take that deep breath and look at the situation objectively. 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night allows the body to heal. And sleep, I don't know if you knew this, but this is what studies show, that sleep is the most often sacrificed part of our routine. That we'll make time to exercise, we'll make time to go out with our friends, we'll make time to go to work, we'll expand our day as long as necessary, and we're like, I'll just sleep 5 hours tonight. And we'll do this repeatedly and repeatedly. And I know this, I do this myself. I'm like, I want to check this out on my phone. I got to go somewhere. I want to watch this TV show with my wife. That we have excuses, right?
Yeah, and the sleep really is the only way that you clean all chemical in your brain is sleeping. So if you know, you'll be intoxicated.
And you were showing me that when there was a video on YouTube about if you don't get enough sleep, it just kind of accumulates that you haven't cleaned out. One, you haven't cleared out your thoughts, because sleeping does stuff to help sort out your thoughts, put you in a nice, clear state of mind. And I have the weirdest thing. If I get like 8 hours of sleep and I wake up, I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't actually know that I feel as good as I do on those days. Like, I think something's wrong with me because I'm like, I feel good. Why do I feel good? And then I realize, oh, I slept 8 hours. Because typically it's like 5 to 6.
Yeah.
And I get used to it, so I don't think I feel bad, but I can tell when I've had good amount of sleep. Exercise regularly. The study here shows 30 to 50 minutes daily of semi-intense exercise. I heard this one before. This was actually funny. Can I have you're supposed to exercise for these 30 to 50 minutes where you can have a conversation, but not want to have one. So the guy who did this YouTube video said that's why he likes working out with his wife, because he can have a conversation, but he doesn't want to have one.
Right. Me too.
You too. But exercise regularly is good for you. We talked about this with anxiety, and we talked about this with being grateful. Writing in a journal, putting thoughts down on paper. You can relive your happy thoughts, but you can also write out your stressful thoughts, put them in perspective, and it can be the first step of approaching rather than avoiding anxiety. When you approach anxiety, you approach the monster, all of a sudden you see it in the light of day. It's not as scary as when you leave it in the corner day after day after day after day. And
also, I guess this technique helps for also recognize your emotion. Because if you have to journal and say, oh, what happened when I was with my friend and we are in the restaurant and one topic is in the table, I become our reaction. What is the topic? That is the mean. And then you use your right situation for reflection. Now you know when this topic
You've already thought about it.
You thought about it. The next time you know overreaction.
Because I know how I'm going to react. When this subject comes up, I'm going to react this way.
Yeah.
So that's intelligently approaching, emotional intelligence. Take up hobbies. Hobbies are good. Learn an instrument, paint, build, craft, garden. Do some of those athletic type activities, dance, bike, jog, martial arts. The hobby can distract you from other things. Not only are you getting your exercise in, so you have 3 benefits to hobby, right? So you can get your exercise in, you can be distracted from things that bother you, and you can meet new people.
And also maybe your brain can again go to low level of all chemical because you are maybe focusing do puzzle, okay, or maybe you paint, so it's more relaxing your body and your brain and feel better. And
as you learn new things, you add more brain structure, which give you more choices of solutions to problems you have. So the more options you have to solve things, the more easy things are to solve. And that's why learning new things give you new paths, new thoughts. Just learn, also teach, because it's the next step. Yeah. So teach.
Yeah.
And I'll go through these last 2 real quick. Spend some time outside. You can be walking around the neighborhood. You can be seeing the nature. There is a evolutionary psychology piece that's been being promoted here in the architectural design world, which is called biophilic design, which they use green scenes or actual trees and sand and water. And when the human being has this stuff in their environment, they feel better. There's increased well-being and they have better performance. And this is a biological, physiological response to nature that's innate to us. It's not something that is being taught. When you go into the woods and you experience the trees, there is something that actually happens to us that we don't know what it is because it's not something we were taught, but it's inherent.
And also I see some statistic, and also I have a training for how teach, learn from how teach. And then one of the point, I don't remember the number, but the group put just learning without windows, just in the this, and other group is training in the open area. We see the trees, see the environment, and the
it's like a 20-30% difference in outcomes that they score higher, they have better well-being, they're healthier. People who go to offices, and I have statistics on this for another show and presentation we've done, but you get 20%, actually it's probably even more than that, reduced call-outs for being sick, better productivity. There's all these benefits, less heart attacks. I mean, there's this huge benefit
so being
of having this.
With the nature is amazing.
And then finally, number 10, lead with emotional intelligence. Stop the amygdala from hijacking your response. Make appropriate, non-impulsive decisions by letting your prefrontal cortex jump in. Be mindful, relax, take a deep breath before acting. Appreciate you watching 90 Day Soulmate with Lisett
and Jim.
Thank you.
See you next.
You're listening to 90 Day Soulmate with the Relationship Engineers, Jim Gulnick and Lisett Guevara, only on LA Talk Radio.